At Wings of Transformation Publishing, we are committed to helping our authors reach their goals and pursue their dreams of becoming published authors. We work closely with each author to ensure a successful publishing experience, and we are dedicated to helping them tell their stories in the most meaningful and impactful ways. We look forward to putting you on the path to writing your book. At Wings of Transformation Publishing, we are committed to helping our authors reach their goals and pursue their dreams of becoming published authors. We work closely with
Greetings. We're navigating through a very new platform. We encourage persons that are here tuning into M Divas on the airwaves to really stay tuned, stay with us because we know we're live and we're looking forward to some things. And we will keep in our frameworks of engagement. You're tuning in to a live broadcast that is forthcoming at the top of the hour. And we look forward to having you join us to learn about things that are happening near and far, things that are linked to culture, healing, arts, technology, and spirituality for life, inspiration, freedom, and edification. Chats for life. We'll get an opportunity to spend some more time together sharing updates. What's been happening in the Caribbean? What's been going on in the 48 contiguous? What's happening in Europe, Asia, Africa, Central America, South America, and the world? We're looking forward to having you join us on the first and third Thursdays. And tonight is a special bonus podcast. And our customary piece when we talk about our speaks, where we get an opportunity to speak of building a new legacy, building legacy, strengthening how we empower ourselves, and also just taking these opportunities to look at a couple of different things through the lens of other activities that we have not had the joy and privilege of understanding or engaging in. So we're looking forward to being able to highlight some of those different pieces. As we keep learning this different platform, we're also excited about being able to share a combination of things. Greetings. I am Dr. Chinzira Davis Kahina, respectfully. And that's powerful because we're really navigating through a variety of different platforms and hoping that we can at least begin to share them. Dr. Chen, here on the cultural capital of the Virgin Islands, the Isle of St. Croix. Why did I join a Planet Marketing? Intergenerational wealth, being able to leave a legacy for my family, helping future generations embrace prosperity, life, and wealth in body, mind, soul, spirit, and consciousness for generations upon generations upon generations. This is an opportunity for you to join a professional network that is strong, permanent, and provides for generational wealth. Join the Global Legacy Builders Network via We welcome you. So we tried really hard to see how we can actually reconstruct some of the things that we do in these different spaces and being able to bring a different perspective to how we go through some of these different programs and be able to bring this into our fruition. Again, at the top of the hour, we'll start with a little bit of music, a little bit of engagement, and then we'll just go right into the content that we'd like to share tonight on Us Speaks, special bonus podcast, Building a New Legacy. And we'll do that very, very shortly, very, very soon. And part of what we like to do, because we love what we do, is to always bring that word sound power around some of the vibrations. Always being careful of what we do have engaged. Ooh. Ọba ni wọ́n jẹ níran bàbá rẹ̀ ọmọ mo rohùn fólú o. Adékúnlé ò fẹ́ wàhálà bẹ́ẹ̀ ni ò fẹ́ ní ìra rárá. Jẹ́jẹ́ lọmọ Èkó Adékúnlé màmá ń lọ ní tiẹ̀ ó jàre. Akíkanjú ọ̀hún akin. Adékúnlé máa wo wọ́n níran. Ọmọ mo rohùn fólú máa wo wọ́n níran. Ò fẹ́ wàhálà, ò fẹ́ ìnira láyé torí orí adé níyàn. Adékúnlé ṣá máa wo wọ́n níran. People wey no dey feed you, always the first to talk about your life. Look at the irony. Shame you for public, on the beg you for side. Don't get it twisted. I know the kiss see that shit is not healthy. Keeping my distance. Some people are worse than pandemic. If it go cause my peace, then I go take my leave. If it no be money, do not disturb me, please. If it go cost my peace, that's some expensive shit, oh. If it no be money, do not disturb me, please. It is what it is. And that's just like a small portion of what we're going to be moving into tonight when we talk about the beats and talk about the lyrics and talk about the messages and talk about the songs. We really would like to take some quality time tonight to really bring truth to power and talk about some of the things that are happening within our communities, and definitely bringing some fire to some of the things that we have had the joy, privilege, and opportunity to share quite widely. And with that being said, I know we are at the top of the hour. I'm going to keep on moving forward because I am really excited about what we're doing tonight. Part of what I'd like to do is give a little rundown of what our broadcast is for those that are not as familiar. I think that it was wonderful for us to just listen to a moment of It Is What It Is. This is a piece by Adekunle, an African beat artist. And I think it's important that sometimes we overlook how important it is for us to know it is what it is. Certain things happen. You can change up things, try things with the best intentions, deal with discernment, and sometimes it doesn't go the way you would like it to go. So I want to just highlight some of that. And I also would like to take this opportunity when we talk about building a new legacy. What does that mean? Or what does that sound like for you? How does that manifest change and transformation and positivity in your life, right? And I ask these types of seemingly redundant questions primarily because sometimes when we're talking about legacy, we, for the lack of a better word, we've overlooked it when we speak of what is Oz Speaks, dealing with ancestral sacred traditions and being able to talk about these things that highlight culture, healing, arts, technology, and spirituality through a lens of life, inspiration, freedom, and edification, and being able to speak of Chats for Life in a very positive, uplifting way so that we actually strengthen our personal house, our familial house, our community houses, our nation houses, and wider to really helping all of humanity. So Oz Speaks and linking that to this particular podcast with them divas on the airwaves vibe is really allowing for us to strengthen how do you speak about things from an interdisciplinary space, what kind of transcultural media broadcast techniques and strategies facilitate our ability to talk about some of these things, and just having an conversation. I know, new term. Conversation sometimes sounds like we're conning people or like we're trying to do something on a less than positive side. So when we say conversations, we're just saying a life filled, life inspiring, life generated, life uplifting type of versation, like how we're speaking to each other, what kind of messaging are we exchanging, and doing that with the best intention and with the best medicinal flavoring, shall we say, to what is being shared, what is being said. We will not always agree. And it's not just that we will agree to disagree as much as it is that we are learning each moment, shorter than that. We're learning each squinet, shorter than a second, to the best of our ability, so that we can speak of actions that we're all engaged in or actions that we have observed. We're looking at perspectives on global affairs and movements in the Caribbean, one of our highlight spaces since I reside in the Caribbean space, and also looking at Africa because that is a grounding, a foundational core of some of the work that I'm engaged in. And of course, looking at Eurasian experiences and other international experiences and being able to share with some degree of clarity how we are moving in these times and these contemporary spaces and bringing that type of truth to power to the forefront. And I am really excited about how we are able to keep this type of interaction, this type of vibrational shift, this type of engagement to the best of our ability until such time that we can do something a little different. Hence, the month of October breeds a significant amount of informational shifts. We've had a number of celebrities, and that's what I like to always start. We have a number of celebrities that are always in the news. Sometimes not for the most positive things, really not positive at all, but sometimes for some very positive, engaging experiences, opportunities, and so forth. So I really would like to highlight, you know, would like to highlight an opportunity that was shared with us. And I say shared with us in a very, very positive way. I just had the wonderful opportunity to continue with a partnership engagement with the Eastern Caribbean Islands Culture Conference, which is also known as the Islands in Between Conference. And it's customarily for more than 23 years now, every year, usually on or about October, November, usually in November. It is organized by the University of Puerto Rico, Rio Piedras, alongside the University of the West Indies, Cape Hill, Barbados. And this year, for the 23rd and first physical conference, face to face, since 2019, it was hosted by the H. Labadie Stout Community College in Tortola in the Virgin Islands, the UK side of the Virgin Islands, under the presidential leadership of the Honorable Dr. Richard Georges, and a staff that we can only say exceptional hospitality, exceptional attention to IT details and other affairs. We were very, very comfortable with persons that were able to deal without translations or interpretations, but there was enough meaningful exchange so persons didn't have issues because virtually everybody in the space was either bilingual, some trilingual, and even wider in terms of multiplicity of languages. And this brings together scholars literally from around the region and the world that continue to stay interested in affairs around Eastern Caribbean island cultures, their literature, their languages, different types of linguistic studies, their educational techniques, a variety of areas around psychology and other social sciences, as well as looking at the connections to socioeconomic affairs, nonprofit organizations, and philanthropy, private public partnerships that facilitate affairs of dealing with natural as well as man made disasters. Again, we live in the Caribbean. We don't have four seasons, but we do have a hurricane season every year. Ponder on that for a moment. Right. So, with that being said, issues that were shared, some of the presentations were around climate change, some of the presentations were around different strategies and tactics for how do you infuse Caribbean centered research and studies in contemporary educational spaces. Some of the inquiries were addressing health care issues as well as the common misnomer that people overlook that it's not just any kind of capitalism. You've got a variety of different types of capitalism. While that's a particular economic system, but sometimes it's geared towards disasters or it's geared towards other types of crises, And what we've seen is that there were also conversations, there were some graduate students, as well as professors, independent researchers, persons that are in non traditional academic spaces that came together and really shared some fantastic research, fantastic work that I can only commend the organizers. I've had the joy and privilege, and it was mentioned a number of times during the conference proceedings, that the University of the Virgin Islands, where I teach, has been involved in providing support, particularly from 2012 when the Virgin Islands Caribbean Cultural Center was actually launched at the University of the Virgin Islands Orville Ken campus in St. Thomas in November 2012. And the Islands in Between conference was hosted there. And during that conference convening, the Virgin Islands Caribbean Cultural Center, housed inside of the College of Liberal Arts and Social Sciences, was actually launched, under the deanship at that time of the Honorable Dr. Simon B. Jones Hendrickson, who is now retired from the University of the Virgin Islands after, I should say, 40 plus years of service, exceptional service, as well as service to the government of the Virgin Islands in previous administrations. And I say these things because sometimes when persons hear about a conference, it's like, oh my gosh, they're going to just talk, 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 talk. And it wasn't like that. Persons came with, yes, some persons read their papers, some persons had their PowerPoints or their slide decks to complement what they were sharing. And some persons actually shared with us the practical element of, yes, this is the research I've done, but this is the way that it is utilized, for example, in the classroom, or this is the way that it's presented to a particular government to shift and create more progressive and more sustainable and progressive policy. This is what has been used to help divisions or ministries of health and human services to improve the outcomes of what services they do provide to the wider community. So, what I enjoy about the Islands in Between conference, and I have to give a special shout out to the UPR RP team led by Dr. Nicholas Paraclas and Dr. Danaban Kuabong, both professors at the University of Puerto Rico, Rio Piedras, and they they integrate literature and linguistics and languages in such a way that it ends up providing a context for how we actually engage in some of these different proceedings. What I'd like to do, and I'm going to make sure that I do this in the quickest manner possible, is I just wanted to, I thought of trying to play a video, but because this is a platform that I'm still learning, I will just share with you what were some of the themes, some of the colleagues that came and presented, and some of the works that were just, like I said, it was just amazing what transpired in some of these activities, these programs, and these proceedings. And then to have a plenary session that opened up the conference that just gave some context to what are some of the realities inside of Tortola and the wider Virgin Islands on the UK side, what people like to call the BVI, right? And I think it's really critical that this particular convening that took place between the 24th and 26th of October be looked at, through a lens of a couple of things. It was wonderful to have the president of Lavity Stout Community College, Dr. Richard Georges, joined alongside, a team, Dr. Laverne Vanderpool Baptiste, Miss Monique John Latchman, Miss Akima Letsom, Miss Rochelle Smith, Dr. Patricia Turnbull, Dr. Genevieve Fagu, Miss Dana Lewis Ambrose, and Miss Vina Pemberton. And I must say, the team worked so efficiently to make sure that everything was put in place for the conference. Some of the logistical details in terms of transport back and forth and so forth. It was very, very well received. And of course, they had support from their corporate sponsors, inclusive of BioSafe Treatment of the BVI, Hustlers of the BVI, RTW Tortola, and the National Bank of the Virgin Islands, along with S&D Security. And I say these things because sometimes we forget that it's some of these corporate and private sponsors that just have an interest in these types of academic, intellectual events. And it really helps because their resources make it so that it can become a cost effective and a sustainably sound and appropriate convening. From the Barbados side, it was the Department of Language, Linguistics, and Literature at the University of the West Indies, Cave Hill, Barbados. And from the Puerto Rico side, the PhD program of the Department of English of the College of Humanities at the University of Puerto Rico, Rio Piedras, alongside the University of Puerto Rico Conference Organizing Committee, Professor Crystal Heffelfinger Nieves, and Professor Donovan Kuabong, Gabriela Panelli, and Professor Nicholas Fataklas. And I want to give a special shout out, as I did earlier. I mean, Professor Cristal Heffelfinger Nieves, she just made a lot of things pop and bounce in very quick manners. And the team from the UE Cave Hill Barbados just navigated in proper form as they customarily do, along with the core local organizing committee at the H. Laverty Stout Community College. So it went very well. It was very exceptional, very well organized. And just for the purposes of our broadcast tonight, in addition to having like opening and welcoming remarks from these three entities that were central to the organization of this particular conference, there was a keynote address shared, and I'd like to share the title: Empowering Our Future, Constitutional Advancement, and Leadership in the Virgin Islands. And this was shared and presented by the keynote presenter, the Honorable Ingrid Moses Scatliff. And I need to say Esquire because her training by profession is as a lawyer, and she was exceptionally detailed in her presentation on sharing an analysis based, again, from a legal framework, but also from a framework of how the people are to be central to any kind of governmental, constitutional, any form of social governance advancement, that the people are central to that conversation. And again, coming from the Virgin, when people say the Virgin Islands, we tend to speak of the Virgin Islands in terms of the United Virgin Islands, and not just speak as them through a colonial lens of Virgin Islands of the U.S. on this side, St. Croix, St. Thomas, St. John, Water Island, and Virgin Islands, UK, Tortola, Joes Van Dyke. The list is longer for them. Anegada, there's a number of them. There's a lot of them. So I don't want to try to, Salt Island, Peter Island. They've got a lot of islands because they always speak of the Virgins, and there's quite a few of them on that side, and the UK side. I think it's important to know that the, in Attorney Moses Scatliff's presentation, there were some highlights that I desired to share tonight. But what I would prefer to do is wait until we get all of the snippets together, and then that way in a future broadcast we can actually share some of that and have our guests join us and have some discourse around that. But I just wanted to highlight some key points that she did share, just in terms of the importance of governance being transparent and also being open and accessible to the people that they serve. Many times, not just, and we're not just speaking of the Virgin Islands, UK, but in the world, it's important to remind our leaders, especially our elected leaders, not just those that are appointed by elected leaders, but those that are elected by the people, to continue to remember to keep the people informed, aware, and engaged. Right. So I thought it was really powerful that in her presentation that was highlighted. And then after that keynote address, there was a plenary, and the plenary focused on, again, the political status of being an island in between. And it was emceed by Miss Shayna Smith Archer, and the presenters that were with us were the Honorable Ingrid Moses Scatliff, Dr. Harlan Vanterpool, medical doctor. I want to highlight that as well. And then Mr. Coy Levans, who is an aviation specialist and brought a whole network of information on the connectivity between the corporate and the public sector, which I thought was really the corporate, public, and private sector, which I thought was really powerful to show that distinction. And it was a wonderful conversation, and it really allowed for persons to engage in a way that was very, because there was a Q&A shortly after. And even though it wasn't a long question and answer segment, it was wonderful to just know that people are thinking about, how do we engage with constitutional affairs? How do you engage with political status? And this becomes important for spaces that are still either in some type of colonial framework. We'll give an example. In the Virgin Islands of the United States, we are a non-incorporated, non-self-governing territory of the United States in 2024, even though there was a transfer and purchase from the Kingdom of Denmark to the United States of America in 1916, formalized ceremoniously in 1917. So over 100 years, and we're still navigating through that process. We're getting ready now to actually vote for it in our forthcoming elections for new senatorial representatives, as well as Board of Election representatives, as well as Board of Education representatives, and also new representatives for the sixth Virgin Islands Constitutional Convention, where there's going to be, for the sixth time since 1965, a process pulling from the existing drafts. One of the more recent drafts was completed in 2009 during the fifth Constitution Convention, and for a variety of reasons that I won't go into tonight, it did not pass the policy and procedural component to be able to become the new constitution for the Virgin Islands in the United States. In contrast, in the Virgin Islands on the UK side, the BVI, they do have a constitution. It's a quite engaging document that provides governance in terms of their different type of association with the United Kingdom, and therefore they're doing a review of of their constitution, and so their engagement again at this conference, it became very, 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 I won't say loud, but it was clear that there's a lot of conversation amongst intellectuals and academics, amongst common community scholars, amongst corporate and private sector and private and public sector entities, as well as students, as well as persons that are in and out of the region, that are seeing all of these changes in these spaces that for some it's just sand, sea, sun, and fun. And we have to remind people, this place that you're calling your vacation paradise, people live here. I'm going to say that again. This place that you see as your vacation paradise, it is respectful for you to remember that people live here. And there are the same realities that you experience wherever you come from. People have to deal with housing, clothing, healthcare, education, jurisprudence and law, agriculture, food security, public security, general survival, all the time. Transportation. And then remember, we're in islands. So our transportation is you're flying or you're on the water. We don't have highways between our islands yet. So we're very dependent on how things are shipped here, how things are mailed here, how things are transported here. Our inter island travels, sometimes, for example, I listen to people tell me, I got a plane ticket from New York to LA for $150 round trip. I haven't seen a ticket like that in a long time, but I will give you some context. To travel between St. Croix to St. Thomas, all of 20 minutes flight, and that includes getting on a plane, is more than $200 round trip. Let that simmer for a minute. 40 miles, 20 minutes. Small plane. And we haven't navigated how to make that more cost effective so that at least more exchange, more commerce, more trade, more engagement can happen between and this is all within the Virgin Islands of the US. We won't even speak of the estimated $830 plus for to fly from here in St. Croix to St. Thomas. Remember I told you 40 miles. Go another 40 to Tortola. And right, airlines will try to charge you $400 for each leg. Does that? It was really a strange experience. And I say these things because that also connects to empowering our future and political status. Because our relationships in the region, you know, we're still the Virgin Islands. If, on this side, on the U.S. side, persons coming out of the U.S., the 48 contiguous U.S. states, they will not need a passport to come here, but you will need, identification, government issued identification in order to gain entry. But you don't need a passport. There's no customs piece like that per se, even though it feels like it because you're still going through TSA and customs and immigration. There's a long story to that. If you're treated like a territory colony, then the sovereign country, in this case the United States, can create whatever entry and departure requirements they desire because they are the sovereign country. So I'll leave that one for now. So let's go back to some of the themes that were part of this conference, which I thought were really fantastic. So some of the combined sessions, and I want to highlight that these were sessions that were happening at the same time in different rooms, different suites on the campus, and it was just a wonderful experience. The themes were like writing in between, and we had a presentation from part of the H. Labadee Stout Community College faculty, Genevieve Ruth Fagu, on BVI, flight and fracture, crash and shipwreck in Barbara Lala's By Such a Parting Light, We had Betsy Neitz of the University of North Florida writing the trauma of coming of age in Trinidad, the young adult works of Kevin Hussein and Tamika Gibson. We had Blanca Pena Ruiz, again from UPR, unraveling contemporary dystopias, Puerto Rican science fiction. And then the next session focused on dimensions of in betweenness. And this was led through the work of Dr. Peter Roberts, a pioneer and founder of the Eastern Caribbean Island Cultures Conference. He's a professor emeritus from the University of the West Indies, Cape of Barbados. And he did a book presentation on Cockabelly Turned Yellowtail. And it was amazing. I can speak to this one because I was present, because we're on the same panel. And the paintings that he shared, the artwork that he shared, and showed how Caribbean art has transformed from early, 20th century, from the 19th century to the 20th century, coming into the 21st century. It was really fantastic, and we know that we're looking forward to more time for this publication that Dr. Roberts is going to be sharing to highlight some of the connections in regard to the Caribbean art, literature, and the impact it has on the wider Caribbean and American communities. And then the next presentation uh, by Dr. Alma Simone and her son, Eugenio Heigel, Esquire, lawyer. And it was powerful to see this mother and son presentation. Again, she is a tenured professor of more than 50 years. I had to count that. No, take it back. 60 years. There we go. At the University of Puerto Rico, Rio Piedras. And the theme was on Puerto Rico, a nation that belongs to but is not part of, a human rights dilemma for the United States, a legal and cultural anomaly. Like that presentation, that we could probably need to have them come as guests so that they can really give some more detail of the essence of what they were saying in terms, again, because Puerto Rico is a commonwealth, but it's still not a state and it's not independent. So America, again, is the sovereign entity for even Puerto Rico. And there's a lot of contention because, again, it's 3 million people strong. Their their communities are very wide throughout the 48 contiguous U.S. and the world, and there are a number of persons that would like statehood. However, America has never really offered that as an option. And then there's other persons that are very comfortable with moving towards independence. Not a majority yet. So that's a whole other conversation. And then we already know that there have been previous presidents of the U.S., will leave them unnamed, that thought that Puerto Rico had and the Virgin Islands had their own president. So we're going to leave that alone. So the last presenter in the dimensions of in-betweenness was yours truly, Shenzira Davis Kahina. In this capacity, in my work through the University of the Virgin Islands here on the Albert A. Sheen campus, as well as the work that I do through a New Parent Ankh Institute. And I did a presentation entitled Sovereign Resilience, Maroon's Legacy and Afro-Futurist Innovations in the Caribbean. And so I had a chance to share a conversation, if you will, catch yourself, conversation around Marinage. And most people, when they think of Maroons, they just think of like runaway enslaved Africans. But it's a little deeper than that because it was not only the exercise of freedom or commanding their freedom, it was also creating community that was secure to protect those people that ran away. It was also spiritual exchanges and engagements to help people get the energy, the thrust and drive to run away. And then it was also the security and care for persons' health, wealth, and beyond when they did make the decision to leave plantation life with some degree of permanence, knowing that if they were captured, they could be tortured, flogged, disciplined, very heavily, and even in some instances killed. It was really, and so we spent time in that presentation sharing some of the legacy building pieces that people have engaged in to understand Marinage in spaces like Jamaica. So we talked about the different maroon communities and highlighted what are the more popular communities. However, there are four standing communities in Jamaica: Moortown, Charlestown, Scotts Hall, and the Accompong maroon communities that operate as sovereign entities and have been working through different relations and relationships amongst themselves, as well as indigenous keepers of the traditions there in Jamaica, as well as sharing an example of what some of the practices, events, annual observances that allow them to have some degree of resilience to this sovereignty that is claimed specific to Jamaica from literally more than 260 years. So we went through that conversation. So I'm not going to redo my paper. I'll just come back to that another time. I'd like to continue on so that you can get a feel for what were some of the other themes. It went into identities in between. And in that session, you had Catherine Miranda Lurchel from UPR. Her piece was entitled Imposition, Appropriation, Resistance, Attitudes Towards English in Puerto Rico. I think that's self explanatory. Sometimes you can come to Puerto Rico, and depending on where you go, you will habla español. If you're not habla español, your tourist card won't go that far, not even your green dollars. What is it? Greenbacks. No, you need to practica, habla un poquito, speak a little bit, and practice. That's what I'll suggest. It was an excellent presentation. And then Wendell Villanueva from the University of Puerto Rico, but in Calle, different campus, spoke on Makojumbi, the search for a Caribbean identity. And then Kevin Kelly from UPR Arecibo, another campus, on lesbian desire and trepidation. And Shani Mutu's Valmiki's daughter, again, looking at literature and looking at intersexuality. And then in between this, and Afro Atlantic identities, we had Nagilati, Dr. Nagi, Nagier Alti Warren from Emory University spoke on women architects of negritude. And for me, again, I was present for this one, so I like that she did a cross pollination of women that were instrumental to the negritude movement. We know the names of the men. We always can, Leopold Senghor, Aimé Césaire, we can go on and on. But we tend not to speak of the Suzanne Césaires and any of the other powerful women. And that was part of that piece. And I like how she referred to the women as architects of the negritude movement. And then there was a presentation by Natalia Ron Lopez from Carleton College on Homo Narans Meets the Slave, a reading of Wilderson's and Winter's answer to the aportia of the Black subject. It was a very wonderful presentation by a grad student that was able to articulate differences in how literary scholars and the work through the works of Wilderson's and Winter were able to be analyzed. And then there was this group presentation by Dr. Nicholas Faderklas and Dr. Donovan Kuobong, along with a group of students and other colleagues, Gabriela Panelli, Suan Aponte Aguilar, Elizabeth Barros, Itza Hernandez, and Emily Hernandez, Marianne Villanueva, Valeria Del Toro, Alicia Figueroa, Graciela Martinez, and Nemesis Morales. And again, there was like a combination because there were persons from UPR Rio Piedras, but then it was also Desmond Odugu from the University of Illinois in Champaign that shared inside of this. And it was this whole piece of a longue durée diasporic waves and trans performances, time, space, intersectionality, and radical rereadings of Afropolitan and Afropean belonging. You can tell these are academics because the titles are not short. So, just for the purposes of what we're conversing on. So, for those that may have just joined, and we're on our next half of tonight's broadcast, we're actually talking about the Islands in Between conference that I just had the honor and privilege of presenting at and being a part of, hosted at the H. Lavely Stout Community College in Tortola, co-organized by the University of Puerto Rico, Rio Piedras, University of the West Indies, Cape of Barbados, and it was just a phenomenal exchange. So we're going through some of the themes, some of the papers that were shared. And mind you, what I'm sharing, that was just day one, okay? And then it was a wonderful cultural night at Carrot Bay. And I want like to highlight that previous president of H. Lavey Stout Community College, Dr. Carl Dawson, was our host, and that was really wonderful to see the platypole where they take the long ribbons and they dance and they definitely mark them around the pole. It was amazing to see it with the style of dance, the music that was used, and I'm always excited whenever I hear in the Virgin Islands are different bands from all of our islands, whether it's from St. Thomas, Tortola, Joseph Dyke, Virgin Gorda, St. Croix. It was wonderful, right, to be able to hear it again. I always, it was a good highlight to hear Stanley and the Ten Sleepless Nights being played for a culture night in our United Virgin Islands, sister island of Tortola. And then on the second day, on Friday, we just went straight with various sessions, right? So the theme was for this opening session was coloniality, gendering, and in-betweenness. And so Professor Sally J. Delgado and Dylan X. Vasquez Solivan from the University of Puerto Rico and Calle, how Puerto Ricans define their English variety, both challenges and perpetuates colonial legacies. So I thought it was really interesting how they juxtapose language that can actually work to actually perpetuate more colonialism or actually shift that. So again, showing how Puerto Ricans define their English variety. And then Valeria Acevedo in dialogue with Alma Simone Bay. It was a wonderful conversation on enslaved women's bodies, literary archaeology, critical fabulation, and the story of Rosa Bay. And that was really powerful to hear the conversations around, listen to that term, enslaved women's bodies. Ponder on that for a second. And then Suan Aponte Alujar from the Universitat Pompeu Fabra in Barcelona and the University of Puerto Rico, Rio Piedras, on identidades trans, estudio de caso sobre el discurso no binario. So again, looking at trans identities and some of the binary ways that you study the binary analyses for how you study that type of engagement and discourse through a literary as well as a linguistic lens. And then the next segment was on music and literature in between. And there you had Suzanne Mullison from Bayreuth, University of Germany. And what was interesting is this was listed, but we didn't get to see this paper. And we were all excited because it was all picong and puns, boasting and complaining, and oral performance in the language of calypso. So we're looking forward to seeing that work be integrated because there were a number of calypsonians in this space. Just so we know, calypso is not just a genre; it's obviously to some a way of life in the Caribbean, right? And then there was a presentation by Sixto J. Merced Rolon, Julia Laporte Garcia, and this is part of the Colectivo Umoja and Puerto Rico, del baile de bomba al bombazo, mirada al género musical de la bomba en el área sur de Puerto Rico, en dos momentos históricos medios Entonces la segunda década, right? But I want to highlight, okay, English, that this was an overview of this Umoja, this unity collective that exists in Puerto Rico, and has done extensive studies on the traditional dance style form, the music and the dance and the songs and the meaning to the cultural heritage of Puerto Rico of the bomba, which is an African rooted traditional form of dance in Puerto Rico. And then there was a presentation by Dr. Donna Kuabong. She did a book presentation on rhetoric of resistance, labor of love, the eco-poetics of nationhood, and the poetry and prose of Lasana M. Sekou. And Lasana M. Sekou, in addition to being the lead chief editor of the Nehesi House of Publishers out of St. Martin, all of St. Martin, I think it was a wonderful delivery of a very unsung yet powerful contributor to literary arts publication par excellence in the embodiment of the work of a still living, still breathing, still active, still engaging, still revolutionary, still powerful beyond words. Brethren, the Honorable Brother Lasana Sekou. So I'll keep going to the next section. And then we went into education in between. And there you had Iris Hewitt, Bradshaw, Lynette Tyson Noel, and Cynthia Celestine from the University of Trinidad and Tobago, along with independent researchers out of TNT on developing students' knowledge of conventional standard English spelling and English Creole speech communities. Sandra Figaro Henry from the UE St. Augustine and TNT Trinidad and Tobago on a topic titled Facing Fate, Flexibility in the Future, the a plausible, pliable path for higher education in Caribbean islands. And again, these are those themes that were really providing practical ways to improve and increase literacy in all its forms: written, spoken, digital, etc. Yes. And then Cynthia Pittman from the UPR Rio Pedras, applying mindfulness techniques to teaching pedagogy, an integrative approach in Puerto Rican classrooms. I thought, again, techniques that we can share with teachers, see if they work, to help strengthen the edification and the educational skill sets, and being mindful of these skill sets for young people. And then the next theme was the discourse and pragmatics of in-betweenness. So we had Elizabeth Barrows from UPR, a brief analysis of discourse and counter discourse in the documentary Landfall. Professor Crystal Heifelfinger Nieves, also UPR, The Pragmatics of Politeness on Anglophone radio stations in Tortola, BVI, which I thought was interesting because her data analysis really brought up even her voice samples of what people say on radio and how people speak in formal tones and how people are polite, even when they're adding shade. We know what that means, right? And then the last paper of that segment was by Gabriel L.E. Suarez from UPR on billboards, junk food, and colonial neocolonial hegemony in Puerto Rico, a multimodal critical discourse analysis. What was deep was that there was a whole piece on billboards pushing fast food, but then also highlighting the impact that fast food consumption has on persons' ability to learn and function in the community. Thereby, these billboards that are bigger than life and that are constructed in ways that they survive hurricanes, while the house right next door to them don't. It was an interesting presentation and it was right on point. And I wanted to thank Gabriel Suarez for that. And then we moved on to language making and breaking. So we had Cherry Lynn Baker, an independent researcher from Saba, The Secret Handshake of Dutch, how the Dutch have systematically denied access to their language. That's self-explanatory. Then Dr. Nicholas Vaderklas, along with Dr. Ellen Petra Kesra, and Eric Mitz of UPR, the Utrecht University of the Netherlands, and University of Aruba in Chambuca. It's that they basically spoke of, let's get it right, Chambuca. This is basically what we do with language in our work. We make the best of a bad situation. Study for a language policy for Bonaire, and that's what they focused on. They've been working on strengthening an actual language policy for Bonaire in a similar form to neighboring islands like Aruba and Curacao, which have made Papiamento a central part of their lingua, their national language, yeah, and just making sure that the way in which the language policies are, it's not forcing Dutch, even though they'd still do that periodically. And it was a lot of good conversation. And then uh, there was a presentation, Akini Gill from the University of Trinidad and Tobago, book presentation from Behind the Bridge to the Impossible Dream. And then the next segment, In Between This and Performance, shared by Camilla Stevens out of Rutgers University, one of my alma maters, was a book presentation, The Coloniality of Catastrophe in Caribbean Theater and Performance. Then Keja Valens from Salem State University on Nyaming and naming Virgin Islands native recipes. Nyaming is like nyaming, like how we eat. So we'll come back to that. It's a colloquial term. And then Professor Megan Sylvester shared a presentation. She's a music sociologist, author, and researcher. She shared up from Trinidad and Tobago, presented on nostalgia and memory in Caribbean music. And then we had a business meeting, and there were different book launches and sharings and messages. And I want to say a special thank you to a grad student, Gabriela Pinelli, studying at the University of Puerto Rico, Rio Piedras. She did a presentation and has actually, well, let me just pause, digitalizing the Islands in Between annual volumes on the languages, literatures, and cultures of the Caribbean. So they have actually put all of the publications from as far back, I believe it's 2008 to 2008 forward. And we usually have a volume annually. And from 2009, 2010, I believe it was 2 volumes annually. One that focused on wider Caribbean spaces, and one that focused on the ABC Islands, Aruba, Bonaire, and Curacao. And I've shared this so that people will know the website for the Islands in Between is forthcoming, and you too will have access to this wonderful resource of literature and publications that have been put out. So please look forward to what's coming forward with Islands in Between. If you don't remember all of that, IIBC, UPR, UE, you'll find us, right? And then we had a wonderful opportunity to fellowship, share notes, network, have supper for those that engage. And on the final day, we compressed most of the remaining presentations into the art, architecture, and languaging of In Betweenness and In Betweenness literary voices and translation. And I want to highlight that these papers were so deep. It was like a feast of information, but it wasn't just a feast of information. It was a feast of practical application of a lot of this information. How you can use it in your places of work, your places of education, your places of worship, in your wider community, in your healthcare facilities, in your emergency management administration facilities. That one. So we had Isis Kayiga, who is completing her dissertation now at Brown University, returning the colonial gaze, 18th and 19th century painting in Jamaica and the counter aesthetics of its modern arts movement. We had Dr. Elizabeth Rezendi, who independent researcher and also the president of the Society of Virgin Islands Historians and a retired educator, historian, librarian, archivist, and much more. And she did a presentation on St. Croix. Each building upholds the character of a town. Cumberland Castle, Fredericksted St. Croix, 1800 to 1921. And she really showed some current past pictures and current pictures, and just the intention of the restoration possibilities of this Cumberland Castle. Then we had a presentation by Stella M. Ramirez of UPR on Lest We Forget, Post Hurricane Maria, artistic and literary responses in Puerto Rico and the United States Virgin Islands, and then she recalled herself. She said, "Now I know the state Virgin Islands in the United States." So I appreciate her willingness to be more empowering and less colonial in that reference. And then Asan Hoyt from the University of the West Indies, Cave Hill, Barbados, did a presentation on filling in the gaps, tense aspect and modality invasion, and like gave this serious, definitive, detailed analyses of the Bayesian English and made it very clear that it is a clear language. And it's not a dialect, it's not bad English, it's a clear, culturally appropriate, and definitely heritage sensitive language in Barbados. And then there was, mhm. and then there was, there were a number of pieces on in betweenness and literary voices and translation. There were pieces, Sherian Shahada did a piece on contemporary historical narratives of slave resistance in the Caribbean, the case of Jamaica, and I can tell she's going to be continuing to do some fabulous work that will also cross over into looking at things of Marinage and the Maroon legacies and sovereignty and so forth. Emily Taylor, the Cuban version, the Casas de las Americas translation of Wide Sargasso Sea from the Presbyterian College. Um, Helene Garrett and Wilhelm Tiebaum, independent researchers out of Canada and Germany, How Memories of the Past Influence Our Present, a story from Suriname. And Professor Garrett, retired, amazing scholar, and really bringing a lot of the clarity around the Dutch speaking elements in the Caribbean, but specific to Suriname. And I think it's really important to highlight that. And she's a dear friend and provides a lot of resources in that regard in terms of translations through a lens of literature, right? And then Abigail Claggett Fadian from Tarrant County College on constructing an Antiguan literary voice. Judy Rock, Akini Gill, and Cynthia Celestine from University of Trinidad and Tobago on composing calypso lyrics with reference to the Paul Elder critical thinking model at a teacher education institution in Trinidad and Tobago. And that was fabulous in terms of the detail of seeing calypso pulling out the inappropriate content, but using it as a tool to really strengthen literacy of students in Trinidad and Tobago in Caribbean spaces. And then Katrina A.G. Welch from the UE Cape Hill, also Barbados, an examination of students' ability to apply and transfer the writing skills taught in a university expository writing English course to see how persons will actually, and what's being done, not just what is theorized, but what is theorized and then what is being done and how it's changed, even the policies of how they're engaged in this type of instruction. And we were looking forward to a presentation by Jason Siegel and Ronald Francis, also of the UE Cave Hill, on linguistic inequality in education, the denial of mother tongue education in the Caribbean. Self-explanatory. If people can't talk the way they know to talk, they're going to not be able to get involved in a lot of things, and the education system going to get crashed. I know you didn't understand what I said right now, so I'm going to say it differently. Persons need to speak in the language that is most comfortable and learn in the language that is most comfortable while they're learning other languages as well. American Standard English is not, or British Standard English are not superior to. I want to make sure we highlight that. We'll come back to that. And then we closed out with presentations again on this in between this work and organization with Dana Lewis Ambrose of H. Labadie Style Community College on the BVI, applying business continuity plans and risk management models to nonprofit organizations in the Virgin Islands. And I sat in for that one also because it was amazing to see the similarities of what's being done, what's being studied in the Virgin Islands on the UK side, as well as in the Virgin Islands on the US side, and how important it is to see the significance of not for profit organizations, non governmental organizations, as their role, their important role that demands respect, acknowledgement, recognition, and funding to then help the communities that they serve because the government cannot do everything. And we all know that. And then in Saka Kikyu, the Financial Services Regulatory Commission of Antigua and Barbuda adjusted realities, employment law in Antigua and Barbuda during the period of the pandemic from March 2020 to March 2021. Jose Montanes from Inter-American University of Puerto Rico on los juegos de mesa y electrónicos como métodos de enseñanza del emprendimiento. So again, looking at the different table games and the impact of electronic methods for how persons really deal with certain elements of learning. And it was another portion on Latin America and the Caribbean. And I think, again, some papers, there were like a few that were in Spanish. And so persons gave a summary in English for persons that were not comfortable in hearing everything in Spanish. But again, this conference and these gatherings facilitate our ability to go to a variety of activities. And then we did a wonderful tour of the island of Tortola. You know, we went from literally from East End to West End and back. And it gave people an opportunity to see not just sand, sea, sun, and fun, but to see how people live in these spaces that we visit, to see their schools, their elementary, junior high, and secondary institutions, and of course their college. And it was a well-rounded experience. With that being said, and tonight I had no idea it was going to be so short, but I'm very grateful, very appreciative of being able to share a little bit of knowledge, a little vision of what we have experienced in the Islands in Between conference that was hosted. And I'm grateful for those that are listening, tuning in. I know that the them divas of the airwaves are going to be continuing to grow stronger and stronger. We're encouraging persons to join, tune in, tell your friends, invite people. 8 p.m. through the weekends. Just keep the energy going so that we can keep pulling it together. Send a lot of word sound power to our CEO, Queen Angela. Sister Queen, she just really keeps making things happen and doesn't let platforms, app issues stop us at all. It gives us an opportunity to give voice and focus to some of the things that we'd like to bring into a person's awareness. If you'd like more information, feel free to email me. You can email me at astspeaks, ASTSPEAKS, at gmail.com. You can also just look for me in various media networks, whether it's Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and but the email is probably one of the easiest ways. I think that over the course of our time together, we will continue to keep bringing things into the forefront and into fruition to the best of our ability. I am always grateful when I get an opportunity to talk about things that keep purpose, and I encourage people to do their part to remember that culture heals humanity, land is our foundation, and spiritual harmony unifies us. Looking forward to you assisting us here with Us Speaks as we continue to build a new legacy and keep supporting the broadcast. Just stay free. We need freedom. Oh, yes, I want freedom. I want freedom. Have a purpose in all you do. Just make sure that your purpose is true. Have a purpose in this here life, so your life ain't fall astray. I live a purpose each and every day, so we can live in Yahweh. I have a purpose in all you do. Just make sure